Hi, thank you for joining us for this episode of Inspiring Better Banking series. Today, we have a huge privilege of having Sangeet Paul Choudary with us. Sangeet is the best-selling author of Platform Revolutions book, as well as the latest book on AI called Reshuffle. Sangeet, thank you for joining us for the conversation today.
Thank you, Puneet. Pleasure to be here.
Sangeet, we have had a great opportunity working with you over the last many years, starting with your first, actually not the first book, the second book of Platform Revolution. And it was an iconic book. It put the foundation for many institutions to see better how they participate in ecosystems and create, deliver and generate better value. And since then, you have done a lot of seminal work in this area, as well as the latest work on Reshuffle. I'm very, very curious, what is the premise of this book, Reshuffle?
Yeah, no, thanks for bringing that up. I think there's a common thread that underlies all of my work, and it's essentially this: to look at when a technological shift happens, what are the factors on the basis of which companies win and then companies lose. So what determines the new sets of winners and the new sets of losers every time technology shifts? And Platform Revolution was looking at that in the context of the confluence of cloud, social, mobile, which led to the platform economy. And today we're at another point where rapid improvements in AI are fundamentally changing the landscape. And so when this new technological shift happens, what are the bases on which certain companies win and certain others lose? And that's really the idea of a reshuffle, that there's going to be a reshuffle of the deck of cards. There's going to be a new set of winners and losers. And the way to sort of get to that answer is to not look at technological shifts at the level of individual tasks. And when we think about AI, very often we go into this mode of thinking about the tasks and what's getting automated and augmented, whereas the key premise of the book is really this: that you need to look at the larger system, because AI's impact happens not just at the level of tasks, but first and foremost at the level of how the industry works, how companies compete, and then accordingly which capabilities are important for this new model of competition, which then changes how organizations value new forms of capabilities, what workflows become important. And so all those things get reshuffled, not because AI comes in and changes the tasks inside, but because it changes the entire competitive ecosystem.
That's very interesting. So it takes us back to the first principle thinking, which you have propagated for a long time, wherein we have to rethink about the value we create, the jobs we do for our customer, and rethinking about how the value shifts in the new context of AI. I'm sure everybody would like to learn, so what are winners doing differently?
Well, I think the first thing is that you need to think about AI not as a way to speed up tasks. You need to start with what you just mentioned. Look at what it does to value, because yesterday's value may not be where value sits in the future. So typically when technological shifts happen, value moves into another part of the value chain. So first of all, look at what's getting commoditized. A lot of knowledge work, for instance, is getting commoditized. If that gets commoditized, where is value shifting? And so accordingly, you move in that direction and you try to create a business model that helps you capture that value over there. And so what winners are really doing is, first of all, they're not looking at this operationally, they're looking at this strategically. And what I mean by that is that they step away from thinking about how can AI improve my workflows as it works today, and they start asking, what's the competitive landscape in which I play? Are there fundamentally new players coming in? Is the basis of winning in this landscape fundamentally changing? And if so, what is that new basis going to be? And so they start placing bets. And the way they do that is not by looking inside out, but by looking outside in to ask themselves, where's the landscape going to be 1 year from now? And in order to win there, what company should I be at that time? And this is a question you ask at every level. The CEO can ask at the level of the company, a team leader can ask at the level of their team, what should our team look like and what should they be delivering 1 year from now? And then you work backwards from there. So you really assume that with the rapid shifts, not just in AI, but in a host of converging technologies, the landscape is going to change at such a dramatic pace that you have to think about what advantage will look like in the future and work backwards from there. So I think the fundamental, even though this feels like an overarching statement, the fundamental difference between the winners and the losers is the winners are betting on what the future state of play will look like and which business models will win. And the losers are betting on, let's apply AI to what we do today, see how we can cut costs, how we can speed up workflows, how we can show some immediate benefits that help us justify further investment.
Well said. And we have traditionally said every business has to constantly do renew as well as new. And I think the way you summarize, you're saying there is a significant new which is going to emerge because value will shift because of commoditization of certain parts of value chain thanks to AI.
That's right.
And that's where the big opportunities lie. When we think of change, often it is very overwhelming for organizations and individuals because, as you rightly said, the change is happening across various dimensions. There's a change in technology. We're talking about AI. There is obviously change happening through tokenization. There is change happening through other forms of technology advancements which are coming in. Then there is geopolitics in our world playing out, and then their customer behavior continue to evolve thanks to whatever is happening in their life across industries. Often the best way people can think of and apply changes also have a control of invariants, things which are
absolutely
holding constant. Help us understand what are those invariants which one can continue to build upon the muscle, and what are the areas where absolutely one has to think from grounds up?
Yeah, I think that is actually the most important point over here, because typically people think about competitive advantage in one of two camps. They think about it in terms of the traditional camp, that if you have a strong moat, you're going to stay competitive for a long period of time. And then there's the other camp which says competitive advantage does not last anymore because things are changing so fast, you have to keep looking for your next source of competitive advantage and it's going to be transient. I believe it's something in the middle which combines the best of both worlds. You have to look at what's not going to change and you have to bet your architecture on that. You can bet your capabilities on what's going to change, but how the capabilities come together, the architecture of how they come together and work together to create a unique business model for you, to the extent possible, you have to bet that on things that are not going to change. So I think that's how I would think about balancing these two things. I'll just give a very simple illustration or story from which has nothing to do with banking, but is interesting. So in general, the sports car industry is a hits-driven industry. So if you want to own the latest sports car, it's really about design. So who's got the best design and so on. The Porsche 911, I believe, is a unique departure from that in the sense that it focused on a specific design. So it's freezed the architecture almost 30 years back. And that allowed it to keep improving the engine within that architecture. So it competes not on design, but on performance. And so what ends up happening is very interesting things. Its performance is always way ahead of the others because the others are trying to compete on design. But more importantly, it has a very loyal customer base because they're looking for better performance and they're getting that on a guaranteed basis. Whereas the other sports car players are betting on new designs, and so they are in a hits-driven business. It either works or it doesn't work. So from a balance sheet perspective, they've converted a hits-driven business into almost a subscription business, if you will, just by ensuring the architecture is fixed and that performance is being built of the latest capability.
It's a lovely example, Sangeet. Thanks for sharing. I'm curious, now that the book is out and you have had an opportunity to discuss with many industries, many corporations, what are the typical questions you're getting in after people hear about the work you have done in the book as well as what you have shared with them?
I think the biggest question people typically have is, we understand first principles are important. What's the way to think about this? So how do we think about what the future landscape is going to look like, where value is going to sit? How do we map that out? And so one of the key things that I help companies with is a very structured approach to how to think about mapping that. And, the key questions you want to ask yourself is, what's the map going to look like, number one? Because if you just use AI to run faster, you could be running in the wrong direction and running without a compass. And you can't get the right map on day one. And you're not supposed to get the right map on day one because the world is changing constantly. But the whole idea of mapping is that you try to get to your best map on day one. execute on day 2, learn, and go back to your map. Don't just go back to your experiments. Go back to your map and say, does something need to change here based on what I've learned? So you keep updating the map as you move forward. And the map essentially is, first of all, to understand what's the logic of value in my industry, because in any industry, there are certain things which are commoditized, certain things which are valuable, and business is not about abandoning the commoditized and only focusing on the valuable. It's about combining the two, bundling the two in a very strategic way. And it's also about strategically commoditizing in some cases, right? So, I mean, a classic example is if you think about the devices business, the iPhone, Android phones, and Kindle are all devices. But they are in fundamentally different businesses because they commoditize different things. The iPhone commoditizes the app, which makes the phone valuable. The Kindle commoditizes the hardware, which makes the book valuable. But actually, an app or the book are both, the cost of replication is $0, but you can give one for free and charge $10 for the other. And Google commoditizes both the app and the hardware because it wants to make money on search. So the more the other commodities spread, the more it can capture value there. So really, mapping is about understanding your industry is not about your products and services at all. It is about your choices about where you commoditize and where you make money. And in order to do that, you need to also then ask yourself, what gives us the right to have that position of control? Because in a map, in today's world, we're building maps of connected ecosystems. So everybody's always getting into everybody else's space. How do you then create a central position of control? So these are some of the questions that people really have when they think about the idea of a reshuffle.
It's such a lovely explanation of what's happening. I'm very intrigued now to ask you, have you built a map for banking industry? And what does the map look like? And can you share some insights with our viewers today on that map?
Yeah, I think, the way to think about what's happening in banking right now is to really think about AI coming in and changing things on a journey we've been on for the last 15 to 20 years. So banking has been changing. I would say, if we take a step back, value chains in general across industries have changed at 3 different levels. So I would say between 2000 to 2010 and early 2010s, most of the innovation happened at the customer layer. And that's where most of the business models that emerge were around aggregating demand at scale and then organizing the ecosystem around yourself. Then innovation moved to the middle of the value chain when companies started opening up APIs, both because they were technologically feasible but also regulatorily required. And so that happened in the mid-2010s. And we started seeing fundamentally new companies that had nothing to do with the customer layer, companies like Stripe, coming in and capturing and creating a lot of value in between. And with AI, we now have the ability to go further down the value chain and really change the input into many value chains, because an AI-enabled capability can become an input into any number of industries. And if that bundles a banking or financial services capability with it, it can be a supercharged input into many different industries. So instead of selling payments, if you sell an intelligent payment as a service into a certain industry, and you bundle the intelligence around the payments capability, you get the right to capture more of the value chain and more of the customer journey. So I think one of the key things that we are seeing is that because AI acts as a wrapper around previously commoditized capabilities, you have the ability to take existing capabilities, bundle AI capabilities with them, create a new capability that is unique to your industry, and then provide that as inputs. Because the reason I say provide that as inputs is because you're not just providing it to your competitors, you are in a connected ecosystem. So even if you're a bank, you're working with 10 other industries and you're providing this, let's say, intelligent payments capability into all of these industries in a very industry specific way. So that's one key shift that's happened on the journey that we've already been on. The second key shift is really the fact that we've already been on this transformation towards embedded banking, where banking capabilities can be embedded anywhere. But it's not just that they can be more intelligent now, but also that they can be embedded in ways that do not require a lot of prescribed structure and business development. So in the past, if you wanted to embed something, you needed to do business development, you needed to open up your APIs, you needed to provide a capability as a service. And the customer journey was very step-by-step structured, but also the interfaces were very structured. And today, innovation is happening at both levels. So customer journeys are no longer structured. If you're chatting with OpenAI, ChatGPT, that's not a structured customer journey. There are no steps. The interface is intelligent enough to take you on any customer journey. So customer journeys are much more complex, intertwined, but more importantly, the interface through which a resource or a capability can be accessed is changing as well. In the past, the only option was direct integration or open APIs. Today, you have new options coming in. You have agents able to scour the internet and get information back. You have model context protocol. You have many other forms of innovation happening in terms of how resources are accessed. So if you see about these two things, the nature of the resource, how they are accessed, and the journeys into which they are served, all these three things are changing rapidly with AI, and that provides a fundamentally new map for us to navigate.
This is very fascinating, Sangeet. I'm going to shift the conversation to individuals.
Sure.
Your book also talks about not just how corporations should think differently, businesses should think differently. It's also about how individuals in their personal lives and professional lives think differently in this new context. Do you want to throw some light on that?
Yeah, absolutely. And the reason I wanted that to be a big part of the book is because the question and the answer are very interrelated, in the sense that everybody out there has both questions. What does this mean for my company? What does this mean for my job? Nobody's asking only one of those questions. They're all asking both the questions. At the same time, both these questions, the answer to both these questions is deeply interrelated. So as I answer this, you'll realize that I've talked about all those concepts at the company level. The same concepts apply at the individual level. So the first thing to keep in mind is that we have been brought up in a system and a society that values skills learned through training. And for the first time, we have a technology that can replicate the output that can be achieved with those skills. I'm not getting into debates of, is AI intelligent, is it human? All of that is irrelevant. From an economy perspective, we are valued in an economy based on the outputs we can provide and the outcomes we can achieve for whichever systems we participate in, typically our jobs, our companies. And if some of those outputs and outcomes can be achieved using a prompt, it's not a question about human versus AI anymore. It's just about what is the most effective way of, and I'm not just saying cost efficient, but effective way of getting to that output and outcome. So what's important for all of us to figure out is that as AI improves, which of our skills are increasingly going to become commoditized? The reason those skills were valuable in the past was because they were there. And they were there because you had to go to school for 4 years, get trained, get a shiny degree, go into a company, get trained again, and keep getting trained. So the cost of managing and nurturing the skill was very high. But if all of that can now be managed and nurtured by funding AI companies, then that capability does not remain with us as individuals. So the first thing we need to look at, just like a company, is ask ourselves what's getting commoditized. If that's getting commoditized, value is shifting somewhere else. Where is that value shifting? I talked about the example of the anesthesiologist this morning. It's a really interesting role. And the reason it's interesting is because it's not about automation or augmentation. An anesthesiologist's tasks are all automated today. He uses a bunch of machines to manage anesthesia administration. But really, he's being paid very highly because he's managing an important risk, which is the patient's condition at the time of operation. So you are paid not for the tasks you perform, but for how important a job you solve in the system that you inhabit. And whether that job fits with your tasks or not is irrelevant. So when you're thinking about AI coming in, look at what it does, not to your tasks, but to that particular problem you're solving in the system. Look at that. And if the system around you is changing, look for new problems that need to be solved in that system. What's that going to look like? A very simple example is when SaaS companies first came up, every company started adopting SaaS tools to manage the customer journey. But if the sales team adopts one tool, marketing team adopts another, customer support adopts another, then every team is becoming faster, but they're also becoming less coordinated. So an entirely new role came up, not because technology took away jobs, but because technology broke things in a fundamentally new way. So the role of revenue operations came up because there was no person anymore who was responsible for managing these faster individual silos. And so my point is that new risks, new coordination breakdowns always happen with technology. Look for that. And the final thing I'll just throw out over here is, as I mentioned, even if things get commoditized, if you bundle them with something valuable and create something that enables you to capture more value, that bundling is very important. So a simple story I'll just throw out over here is how magic has changed since the rise of the internet. We don't think of magicians as knowledge workers, but they are in a way, because they are really charging a premium for the wonder that they create, and that wonder is created because you don't understand how the trick happened. But the internet took that away, because the moment somebody performed a trick, somebody on YouTube would deconstruct it. Now the challenge with that is that while the time to deconstruct a trick is 2 minutes or whatever is very little, the time to perfect that trick is years. So magicians were disincentivized to perfect the trick. So they stopped learning new tricks in general. If you go to magic shows today, if you watch any TV program around magicians, you'll see that magicians, all of them run the same set of tricks, but they innovate in the stories they tell around those tricks and the props and the complementary capabilities they use, sometimes using technology as well. So the basis of the trick is still the same, because the trick has become a commodity. And because there's so little innovation in the trick, you actually have programs like Fool Us by Penn and Teller, which are just focused on seeing who's still innovating on the trick. But the majority of magic is actually looking at bundling commoditized tricks with non-commoditized experiences to create that same sense of wonder that the trick used to create in the past. So really think about, when your parts of your job get commoditized, what else do you need to bring into the picture so that you are still solving an important problem for the system, but also you're combining other valuable pieces while solving it.
That's a lovely framework you just shared with us. Thank you so much, Sangeet.
Thank you, Puneet.
As always, it has been very enriching talking to you. Looking forward to doing more work together. And thank you for joining us. Stay tuned for more such conversations. Bye for now.